I think we're at this really interesting point in the housing market. You look at where interest rates are, where mortgage rates have moved, and you look at where housing starts. So, new housing has moved. And if you just looked at those two data points, right, ignored everything else that's going on in the world, and I showed you two, you would say, oh, there had to have been tons of layoffs. There had to have been a really big impact on the sector economically, and we know this is one of the biggest sectors through which the Federal Reserve affects the real economy is through the housing market. And so far, there really hasn't been that big of an impact. So if you look at employment, a big example here. So you're saying you raise interest rates, people get less mortgages, they start fewer houses. People in the construction industry should lose their jobs if that happens. So far, we've really not seen that. I think something that's been underappreciated is even though starts have been really strong because of all the supply chain issues, because of everything going on in the overall economy, completions have been really weak. And the amount of housing under construction is still a ton. And that's meant, the Fed raising rates hasn't had the perfectly expected impact on the housing market that I think a lot of people were looking for going into this year.
Mm-hmm.
The big question is, okay, if mortgage rates are stabilizing, if we feel like the Fed, even though we expect them to hike a bit more, their path at least feels a little more set. It feels a little more clear than it did throughout the rest of this year when they were constantly updating the forecast to be higher and higher interest rates. Does the housing market stabilize? And because housing is such a big part of the business cycle, does it mean the U.S. economy kind of stabilizes?
Yeah. And your view on this is that it may not. Is that right?
My view, I like I said, I don't want to make a strong forecast either way, but I think my view is that that's underappreciated factor in the U.S. economic outlook. That's what I'll say. That's what I'll say.